It's the egg, and I'm John Spade. You already knew that. That's why you're here. It is September 11th, 2010. And of course, today is a very important day because many are recognizing the great tragedy that was September 11th, 2001, where around 3,000 people died when the Twin Towers came down in a fiery explosion. And it is assumed, and not proven otherwise to this point, that it was a terrorist attack that brought down these towers and basically changed the world forever and changed North America. And so many things were introduced around this time and shortly after that basically are going to go into history books. And 500 years from now, they'll be talking about the significance of 9/11 and what it did to our society and what it did to our world globally. So there's a few things I want to talk about today. I'm going to sort of touch on, I now know that the egg is, well, I look at the hit count on all the previous eggs that I've done. And of course, when I'm angry and I'm talking shit and telling things the way I see them, my hit count goes way up. I'm not sure how that works. I'm still trying to figure this whole out. The social media thing and networking and what causes somebody to click on a link. If you checked into the egg yesterday, I put something really ridiculous up there. I was out golfing and a squirrel jumped into my golf cart, foraged around, and took a Reese's peanut butter cup out and went on its merry way. I don't know if it's storing up for the winter or whatnot, and it's probably had many victims out on that golf course, I'm assuming. But that was the light of it. Today's heavy because, of course, on Facebook, everybody's posting "Let's not forget," "Least we forget," the significance. I'm going from a different angle, and you probably already knew this was going to happen because I'm a conspiracy nut. So, keeping that in mind, this is where we're going. 9/11, Twin Towers. 6 months before that happened, a gentleman by the name of Silverstein took out a rather interesting insurance policy on those two towers. It was worth $6 billion. $6 billion. This is how it worked. The towers came down. Roughly a year after that, he went to court and was able to convince a jury and a judge that, in fact, it was two separate terrorist events. So rather than just getting $3 billion paid out on a property that he paid, I believe it was in the area of $99 million for, or it was $900 million, somewhere in that area, and he gets a 100-year lease on the Port Authority. So 6 months prior to those buildings coming down, massive insurance policy, paid out $6 billion because he was able to convince a jury that it was in fact two terrorist events. Conspiracies abound. Everybody's seen them, or if you haven't, where you been hiding? You got your head in the sand? There are many great documentary type things happening on Google that you can look into the Twin Towers. Both sides. Both sides are plausible. Yes, I'm not going to sit up here and say it wasn't a terrorist event because I don't know. We may never know. It's like JFK. Did his own people shoot him? We'll never know. It's the same thing with the Twin Towers. Now, of course, the argument a lot of people have in regards to the Twin Towers is it's on such a massive level that there's no way they could pull something off like this without it leaking, without somebody knowing. There have to be too many people involved. And that's a good point. But from the other perspective, if you were in fear of your life, knowing how powerful the government is, knowing what they're capable of doing, knowing that it's not just you they could take out, it's your whole family, and who's to say that, people aren't disappearing left and right? It's conspiracy theory time, all right? So bear with me. You might not agree, but I'm going to get it out. Somebody made $6 billion. 3,000 people thereabouts died in those towers. What's really interesting about this is prior to the towers coming down, there were a lot of people that didn't show up for work that day. They were advised not to show up. There was something called it's basically a sell-off of shares in airlines that happened a week prior. And I'm talking massive liquidation of airline shares going out the door. This is a week before the Twin Towers came down. There were a lot of things that happened up to that. There's the issue of all the towers that were surrounding, these buildings that were surrounding that had to be pulled, had to be brought down. How do you... See, this is the thing that confuses me, because the information's out there and we all have it, but whether we choose not to believe it or we know what's happening and it's better that we don't get involved because it doesn't really involve us, I don't know. I wish I could understand the logic and the thinking of what brings us to this point. There's a bunch of other buildings that came down in a very calculated and well-executed demolition. And we get to see it on camera when, I believe it was Lieberman says, yeah, he said, pull it. You can hear the recording of him saying, pull it, and they pull the building. You can see the building come down in a very controlled demolition. Well, I'm not a demolition expert, but I do know from history of watching, I've actually been able to watch a building here in Calgary get demolished. It took 3 months to set that demolition up, to put all the explosives inside that building. Within a matter of a minute and a half, we watched a controlled demolition of a building that wasn't hit by the planes. And sure, it was in the blast radius and some windows were blown out and there might have been some debris on the roof of this building. Not enough to create what we saw. It's all there. Everything is there for us to see. So I don't know, there's some disbelief. Maybe people just can't get their head around the idea that there's that kind of evil in the world. And maybe there isn't that kind of evil in the world. Maybe it's all just in my mind and I'm grasping at straws to try to make sense of the senselessness of all this death. Well, here's where I really have issues. This is what pisses me off. 3,000 people died in that terrible tragedy. Nobody's going to, say otherwise. It was awful what happened. A lot of lives, a lot of families were affected. And here's something you need to know. It hasn't ended there. Everybody that was in that blast radius, all the support people, the firemen, the paramedics, the police, who inhaled all the crap that came out of that building, and that building was built when asbestos was still okay to use. Well, guess what? These people are dying left and right. They're dying from the cancers that you get from ingesting that kind of shit into your body. We're not talking about those people. And chances are, and this would be speculation on my part, but knowing the way things work in the United States and the way the healthcare system is, I'm thinking a lot of those people are on their own. Even if they're in unions, I have a feeling they're not getting the help they need. I don't want to steer it that way. There's other things I want to talk about.